Can AI be used for text counseling? This study constructed a counseling dialogue system using GPT-4. Unfortunately, the study is quite small, as they only collected data for a total of 6 dialogues. The dialogues were about different topics, for example someone struggling with nervousness before a competition and someone having a fight with a friend. From my understanding of the paper, they only tested each dialogue once. So while the study can give us clues as to how GPT-4 interacts with humans and could be used as a text counselor, I think definitely more studies are needed. But let's get into it. They began with instructions telling GPT-4 to generate responses as a counselor. On top of that, counselor guidelines that were developed under the supervision of professional counselors were also provided to GPT-4. So we set up GPT-4 and prompted to be a counselor first. Pretty standard procedure by now, I would say. They also gave the same dialogue to 2 human counselors to see how they compare. In order to compare and evaluate the different responses, third-party counselors were utilized. As the paper states, to analyze the role-play dialogues and the GPT-4-generated utterances, third-party counselors ranked both the utterances of counselors made during the role-play dialogues and the GPT-4-generated utterances. And while the comparison found that the difference in response quality between counselors and GPT-4 is minimal, it is necessary to minimize inappropriate responses as much as possible, as GPT-4 often used words or phrases that were not appropriate to a counseling situation, as the paper states. The majority of responses with low ratings were phrases with inappropriate or unnatural phrasing and wording. And if you ever had a longer conversation with GPT-4, you probably know that it can sound quite unnatural. But especially in a counseling context, it is way more nuanced. In the paper, they give the example of GPT-4 using the word interesting, as the paper states. The counselor who conducted the evaluation commented that the use of the word interesting could cause discomfort for the client, because it could imply that the question were being asked out of curiosity. Another issue that came up with GPT-4 was that there were also many responses where the GPT-4 response discusses the client's problem as if it were somebody else's problem. The paper mentions a few more aspects, but I will not walk you through all of them. If you want to check it out yourself, you can do so by clicking the link in the description. It's only a few pages long, so I highly recommend it. It concludes by saying that they demonstrated that the GPT-4 generated responses were competitive with those of human counselor responses, as the mean rating scores for the counselor's utterances and GPT-4 generated utterances were 0.99 and 0.94 respectively. You can also see an overview of that here in this table. Again, if you want to look at it more in depth, feel free to check the paper out yourself. But they were very close to one another, with GPT-4 only being slightly worse. So it is likely possible to further enhance the performance of GPT-4. We believe that there is potential for providing real-world counseling using an LLM-based system, which I would definitely agree with. But as I already said, I would have wished for a more extensive, larger study and also for a test of more LLMs than just GPT-4. The first one that comes to mind is Pi by Inflection AI, which was basically made to be a good conversation partner and very, very empathic. It seems to me like it's perfect for the study, and I would almost bet that it would have scored much higher than GPT-4. I've used Pi myself and I've talked to it from the perspective of my younger self. For most of my childhood, my teenage years and my early adulthood, I absolutely hated myself. And I set myself back in this mental state, so to speak, and I talked to Pi out of this perspective. And I have to say, I'm very, very positively surprised by the responses. So if you don't know what Pi is, how Pi works, I would highly recommend you check it out in the video right over there.